That's the little old person who can't get out of the way of the car. That's the little old person who can't turn over their shoulder to see the traffic in their blind spot, and then they get wrecked by an 18-wheeler. That's the little old person who falls and can't get up. You don't want to be that person. And the way you don't become that person is you don't become that person. You don't lose those movement options. So maintaining those options is really, really critical, which is
The
not
funny thing
something.
is,
Yes.
the funny thing is that can be the really strong person. That can
Yes.
be the power lifter who can't turn his head because he's done so much bench press. You know,
Exactly.
he's done so
Right.
many heavy deadlifts that he can't rotate when he walks. He has to walk like a tin man. So it can be the person that sits on their ass, and it can also be the person that's trained their ass off. They've just haven't worked on some of the qualities they need to have a long lasting life. Like they haven't done
Yes.
any agility work. They haven't done any balance work. They've just deadlifted heavy things and lifted heavy things. And their body has basically said, we just need to become this giant block that doesn't move. That's why I'm really careful how much really heavy movements I do. And if I do them, I make sure I do them in ways that make me move better, because I can become that giant tin man that's unoiled, that's walking along, you know. So the big thing is training is an adaptation, and you're trying to get a specific result. So you've got to be like, okay, I'm trying to get a little stronger. I'm trying to add muscle mass. What's the amount of stress I need to put on my body for that to happen? And most people either overdo it or underdo it. And so after you've built an aerobic base through different circuits, and the cool thing is if you haven't done anything, if you're pushing, you're dragging a prowler, pushing it, you're doing a carry, you're doing a bear crawl in a circuit, maybe that you're doing a med ball slam with that, and you go through that, 6 to 8 times, that you're at an easy pace. If you aren't trained, you're going to gain muscle just from that, right? So there's no need to do anything fancy or any kind of fancy stuff. If you haven't trained in years, or if you're brand new, just body weight circuits and calisthenics are going to get you a long way. And then once we get through that, and through those things like the bear crawls and the carries and the drags and the pushes, we're going to be able to get your body in a better position so that when you do lift weights, you're going to be able to get into that zone of apposition so that your shoulders, your hips, and everything can move to the best means of their ability, and that we're not putting your body into positions where your body has to compensate or cheat in order to perform the movement. And sometimes that's fine in an emergency situation, but we don't want that extended arched position to be our go-to.
Right.
If I pointed it out to you when we'd go to the gym, and I'd be like, see that? That's a compensatory strategy. That's a compensatory strategy. And the guy would use a compensatory strategy on every single, he's squatting with a hard arch. He's doing curls with a hard arch. He's doing pull-ups with a hard arch. He's not doing a full range of motion. He's, everything's with the shoulder blades pulled together, so that you reinforce that position over and over again, it's going to show up in your own life. And, you walk around with your shoulders pinned back together like this, with your pelvis dumped forward, it's going to really affect your ability to turn. And guess what's going to happen when you're doing dishes and you go to rotate and put the dish away? You're not going to rotate well, and you're going to pop something in your back. So we have to be able to move in different ways. And the key is to mix some of the strength training, some of the bodybuilding with some warm up, with some movement, and then modifying these exercises to get people to move better, as opposed to doing a lot of the things that will buy you instant strength, like pulling your shoulder blades together really hard. But in the long run, it's going to end up with your shoulders not functioning well.
And the second reason that I think people need to stay physically active is something you talk about a lot, Jim, which is explosive power. Because if
That's
you
the
lose
first
the
thing you
movement
lose.
options, then you can't move at all. But if you lose explosive power, you can't do really important things like get up off the floor when you fall, or get out of the way of something that's coming at you that could ruin you. And these are things that people don't tend to think about until they've already lost these abilities. And when they've lost the abilities, then they really become dependent upon other people to push them around, help them navigate life. They become dependent upon backup cameras. And this is just that gradual lessening of your independence. But what I think a lot of people miss is that those number 1 and 2 reasons for physical exercise from a health longevity perspective really feed into a third one that I think is much less understood by the general public, and even amongst health and wellness professionals is probably not. I think that they don't really, the way I would explain it is not the way I think most of them would explain it, which is essentially this: the more you exercise and the more physically fit you are, what you're ultimately doing is you're telling your body, hey, I need more mitochondria in my muscle to be able to produce more force and more energy. Now, the reality is when you look at, say, a bodybuilder who's just trying to look as big as possible, he may have the same amount of mitochondria and be able to produce the same amount of force from his muscles as someone who's actually less well muscled than he is. It just depends on what's the strategy. Like Jim tells really funny stories about putting people who are very, very strong into positions where they can't use their compensatory strategies that they've learned to use, and they look weak. They look and they feel kind of foolish. Is that fair, Jim?
Oh,
And
yes.
the reason why that's so important is that it's not just about muscle size, it's about mitochondrial density. Because what are those mitochondria doing? They're producing light. What does light do? Light structures intracellular water. There's a very strong correlation between loss of muscle mass and increased morbidity and mortality. That loss of muscle mass is one of the harbingers of premature aging, disability, and death. And it's not just about the falls, it's not just about the hip fractures, because what you'll see is that all-cause mortality goes up. All the causes of death increase. And my belief, and I don't know if this has yet been borne out in the literature, but my belief is that the light being produced by those mitochondria structures the water within the body, even within organs that are not necessarily near the muscle. Things like and some of these, I mean, almost all of your vital organs are near muscles. The brain is not exactly near a ton of muscle, but I wonder how light is moved around the body by the blood. I think it has to be. Obviously, light structures water, and if light structures water, then light structures the blood. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is all about the fourth phase of water. Gerald Pollack, Gilbert Ling, Mei-Wan Ho. These are rabbit holes that you can dive down if you want. But the bottom line here is that light produces energy inside the cell by structuring water. And the more mitochondria you have, the more light they're producing, the more structured the water within your cells are going to be. And I believe this is why we see this longevity benefit to muscle mass, which is really only a surrogate marker for mitochondria. And so I'm less concerned from a longevity perspective with the amount of muscle someone has as an absolute, volume, and much more concerned with how much explosive power can they manifest. Can they still use their joints? Can they still go to the gym? Can they still exercise? Can they still walk? Because only if they can continue to use these muscles will they be able to maintain or increase their mitochondrial density to improve their health. And that is why, when I first talked to Jim about him joining me in working together, I saw there's a huge opportunity for synergy here that most patients don't even understand. They're too mired in the model of doctor visit, lab testing, doctor visit, supplements, medications, maybe diet and lifestyle changes. When the reality is that 2, 3, 4, 5 visits with somebody like Jim sprinkled in between the consults makes everything stick better, which is why if you go look at our testimonials at the practice, virtually everyone gives 20 to 50% of the credit for their improvement to some combination of training with Jim or another team member, or the group coaching that we do that's led largely by Jim and the rest of our health coaches.
A big part of that too that people forget about is the brain. Movement develops the brain.